One of the most well-known and often dived caverns in the world is the Devil's Eye system. However, only qualified cavern or cave divers with dive lights are allowed to enter. This cave might seriously endanger your life if you are not careful. Carlos Fonseca experienced what was described. He was an excellent diver, but due to his own carelessness, he got into a lot of difficulty. The Devil's Eye is a cave in Gilchrist County, Florida, about 10 minutes west of High Springs. The cave has two entrances, Devil's Eye and Devil's Ear, and is a part of the Ginnie Springs resort complex. They rapidly join one another in the gallery, a large tube where they are submerged. In general, Devil's Eye offers a quicker and simpler way to enter the cave network. The Devil's Eye is a circular aperture that is equally deep and 20 feet wide. Its documented corridors extend over 30 feet, 10 meters. Divers can spend a lifetime exploring caves, but there is still much to learn about them. But because it has taken 28 lives, it is both stunning and terrifying and is known as a killer cave. Because of this, only trained divers are allowed to enter the cavern and use the current sunlight to look as far as they can. Caledon, Ontario native Carlos Fonseca turned scuba diving into a way of life. His commitment led to a wealth of memorable encounters and enduring connections. His love of discovery and his quest for the uncharted led him to Great Lakes Technical Divers, or GLTT, which enabled him to live out his ambition. Carlos was a skilled side-mount full cave diver, and trimix diver. His most well-known accomplishments include founding Great Lakes Technical Divers as a co-producer of the We Are Water project and winning the National Association of Cave Diving Wakulla Award. Carlos and a few of his teammates were getting ready to take a dive inside the Devil's Eye Cave on Thursday, August 8, 2013. He and his teammates traveled 1 hour by car from their home to their destination. A few of his friends with whom he had nearly always dived served as his teammates. Carlos was having the time of his life, and his buddies used to boast about this man. He had plenty of money, good health, and free time. In order to increase his depth of penetration into the cave, Carlos was building an 80 cubic foot aluminum tank marked O2, oxygen, and Memo 20, which stands for maximum operating depth of 20 feet, 6 meters. He and his teammates made the decision to enter the cave one at a time. Carlos was a skilled diver, so it was evident that he would guide his squad. When he and his friends went swimming while on vacation, Carlos was always the one to take the lead. His teammates asked him about it after noticing that he was about to use an oxygen bottle at a depth that was deeper than it was safe. The oxygen bottle was made to be used to a maximum operating depth of 20 feet, as shown 6 meters. Carlos said that he had filled the bottles himself and was aware that they were full of air, but little did he know. He had a fully stocked mix/blend station at home. Carlos' coworkers voiced worry about the tank, and he asserted that he knew it was empty despite their concerns. The broadcast mode was likewise enabled on Carlos' machine. That morning, nobody had seen Carlos inspect the tank. The team kept working on the dive plan, going through the map and creating emergency and backup plans in case the dive had to be abandoned. Carlos suggested that no visual jumps, which are gaps crossed without gap spools between the main permanent guideline and the beginning of a branch line, be made during the dive. The Santa Fe River's eyes serve as the team's entrance to the Devil Springs cave network. The first 20 minutes of the dive were uneventful with no obvious problems. His comrades were following closely behind Carlos, who was leading the way. They briefly paused to take pictures before continuing to go deeper. When the oxygen levels dropped while they were diving, they should have checked the oxygen levels in their tanks, but they didn't. When Carlos started having seizures and eventually passed out, they had traveled about 400 feet, 122 meters upstream, and were roughly a third of the distance between the park bench and Hill 400. The partial pressure of oxygen was about 3.6 at a depth of roughly 85 feet, 25.9 meters, which led to oxygen poisoning. Please allow me to explain oxygen toxicity for those of you who are unfamiliar. When too much additional oxygen is breathed in, it can damage the lungs and cause oxygen toxicity, sometimes referred to as oxygen poisoning. An excessive amount of oxygen can damage the lungs' tissues and even cause them to collapse. This prevents the lungs from breathing normally. Another name for it is oxygen poisoning. It may make you cough and make breathing difficult. In extreme situations, it may even be fatal. Carlos had indeed experienced that. Carlos started breathing twice on the way out of the cave and at the surface before the conceivable heart arrest. Other divers, including cave instructors, joined in getting Carlos to shore and starting CPR while the group surfaced and called for help. Carlos was brought to the hospital while still alive but was subsequently declared dead. In the Huffington Post, Robert Osborne, a journalist and fellow diver, wrote about the passing of his friend. Dive forums picked up on speculation and circulated a claim that Fonseca died while investigating the Devil's Spring before the news of his passing became widely known. Nowadays, if someone passes away while performing a task, people began to wonder how skilled they were at it. The populace also did. They said that Carlos wasn't a good diver right away. He was, nevertheless, a really skilled diver. The cave instructor who took part in the rescue attempt later examined the tanks in front of sheriff's deputies. The single-stage bottle's oxygen level was found to be 98%. At the time of the seizure, the partial pressure of oxygen was about 3.5 at a depth of roughly 85 feet, 26 meters, which led to oxygen poisoning. The back-mounted double steel tanks were found to contain 30% oxygen. Carlos was very knowledgeable, so nobody could have ever anticipated him to be gone, and the reason being that diving was something he was regarded as an expert at raised doubts everywhere after his passing. All of his friends and family were there trying to make sense of what had happened. How could someone make a mistake at something they have been doing for years? This astonished his buddies. Let's now look at the past and determine what went wrong. Carlos was in perfect physical condition and had no problems at all. There was nothing physically wrong with Carlos, according to the detective who handled his case, Detective Ken Phillips, but a number of other reasons contributed to his passing. First off, there wasn't enough oxygen in the oxygen tank. The only thing his teammates said was that the tank wasn't completely full. They'd ought to have insisted on doing so and verified whether the oxygen tank was adequate. Carlos' family was unaware that he was even checking the tanks, much less leaving for a dive that would almost certainly end his life. If they had only taken care of the necessities that day, no one would have perished, but they didn't. Underwater, oxygen is one of the things you need the most, and Carlos was careless with it, which cost him. Second, Carlos was overconfident that day despite the fact that the planning for this dive was sound. Carlos and his teammates came prepared because they had been planning this dive for years. What happened next? The proverbial bottom of the lighted lamp is the brightest applies here. They simply had a bad day that day. And on that particular day, Carlos was either overconfident or quite confident. The sport of cave diving is now unique to all others. Due to the sheer number of hazards involved, several experts believe it to be an exceedingly dangerous hobby. When exploring a dark tunnel underwater, a number of things can go wrong, such as equipment malfunction, being lost, or needing to navigate through almost complete darkness to reach the exit. That much is evident. Cave diving is not a sport for the weak of heart. Carlos also held his breath for longer than was required. The most crucial diving safety rule is without a doubt this one, as breaking it could be fatal. Holding your breath underwater at the depths that scuba divers go can cause the lung walls in your lungs to break. In extreme cases of this condition known as pulmonary barotrauma, air bubbles may escape into the chest cavity and bloodstream. The arterial gas embolism that can result from air bubbles in the blood is frequently lethal. Maintaining a regular and consistent rhythm while breathing slowly and gently is not difficult. Even the most experienced divers must perform extensive research before even considering entering the water and descending to the depths. We're talking because every dive site is different and factors like weather and current can change substantially. One of the best pieces of advice for safe diving is to always check the current circumstances on the morning of the day you plan to dive, because there are so many aspects that could change. Always make sure you have the proper weights and are familiar with your emergency release belt. Verify that your air tank is entirely full and test your regulator by taking a few breaths through it. Make sure all of your gear is securely fastened and strapped, and always check your kit thoroughly. It is not a stretch to claim that this examination's thoroughness might just save your life. Be thorough at all times. The most important rule that hasn't yet been mentioned is probably to never ever dive without first being properly trained for the conditions and depth of the location. All of these aspects are essential for ensuring your safety while taking advantage of the frequently mind-blowing experience of cave diving. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you like what you saw, please hit the bell icon to get notified when we upload another thrilling cave diving story. Also, please consider subscribing to our channel.